The roar of the crowd echoes through the arena as the sun scorches the bloodied sand. A gladiator raises a curved blade, forged not for dueling, but for killing before thousands. On the other side, an opponent advances with a weapon so brutal that Rome banned it from the games. The moment they meet, you realize there was nothing honorable about it. Every blow, every blade, every tool was made to destroy, swift, cruel, merciless. Today, you will meet the 12 deadliest gladiator weapons ever used. In the Colosseum, instruments of spectacle and of performance. Gladiators were more than just trained warriors. They were living performers in a spectacle designed to entertain Rome with controlled violence. But behind the monumental arenas, the golden dust of the morning and the roar of the crowd, lay an arsenal of weapons that no ordinary soldier would dare carry. Weapons created not for war, but for deadly performance. Tools honed over decades to draw blood, provoke reaction, and decide lives in a matter of seconds. Popular culture often imagines gladiators fighting only with short swords or tridents. The reality is much darker. There were blades designed to cut specific muscles, hooks to tear off shields, hidden weights to break bones, heavy nets that dragged the enemy to the ground, reinforced fists to crush the face, and even weapons designed to destroy improvised armor. Each weapon reflected the social order of the arena, total control of the public, dominance of the publisher, the organizer of the games, and an absolute absence of mercy. Contrary to what Hollywood portrays, gladiators didn't want long duels. They wanted to survive. That's why many of these weapons were so deadly. A single blow could decide everything. In this video, we're going to explore the 12 deadliest gladiator weapons in history, revealing how they were used, by whom, and why Rome considered them so dangerous that it was forbidden to carry many of them outside the arena. Prepare to experience the most brutal side of the Colosseum, where every weapon told a story, and every story ended on the bloodied ground. If you enjoy historical weapons, real combat, and the brutality behind Roman spectacles, sign up for Blades and Shadows. Comment which weapon you found most lethal. Your feedback helps the channel grow and brings even more hidden stories from the arenas of Rome. When we think of gladiators, the image of sword appears automatically. But what many forget is that the I version used in the arena, especially the Spanish sword. The military version of Iberian origin was even shorter, more rigid, and more lethal than the military version. It was not a parade sword. It was an instrument of execution. The gladius was not created for long duels. It was designed to kill through short, direct, and repetitive blows, applied within inches of the target. The gladiators knew that in the arena, the audience wanted blood, and the gladius delivered exactly that. The mortal architecture of the Spanish gladius reinforced triangular tip. The tip wasn't just sharp. It was structured to easily pierce tissues, muscles, and organs. A well-placed thrust could pierce the diaphragm, puncture the liver, or hit major arteries with minimal effort. Short and rigid blade. Unlike the long swords used by troops, the gladius was between 50 and 60 cm long. This allowed for quick and unpredictable movements, perfect for the very short distances of the arena. Sharp side edge. Although thrusting was its primary function, the edges also cut easily, allowing for devastating diagonal attacks. Anatomical handle, built to prevent the weapon from slipping even with blood, sweat, or dust. Something essential inside the arena. Why was it so lethal in the arena? The gladius functioned as a weapon of constant pressure. Trained gladiators knew that. Short punches were harder to block. Thrusts were faster than cuts. Minimal movements would reduce gaps, repeatedly impacting the opponent's defense would break through. A decisive puncture ended the fight in seconds. The gladius transformed combat into something intimate, aggressive, and suffocating. The opponents fought so close to each other that they could feel each other's hot breath and the tension in their muscles. And that's precisely why the gladius dominated. Every inch counted. Roman sources describe fights in which a gladiator would barely take 2 steps before landing 3 consecutive thrusts to his cue. Opponent's abdomen, ribs, and thigh. The audience both loved and feared the precision of that move. While the gladius was the classic weapon, the gossip, he was carrying something even more brutal. The axe. a curved knife specifically designed to attack from angles that other weapons could not reach. It was no ordinary dagger. It was a tool designed to exploit the tiniest gaps, especially against fighters who used large shields. And that's where it became deadly. A blade designed to find meat. The rod. Securus had a curved, slightly inclined shape that allowed the gladiator pull the blade into the opponent's body after the impact. This meant cuts that tore through muscles like a hook, perforations that deepened as they retreated, shots that were difficult to block because they came from below or from the side. The Myrmiones' favorite move was to slide their weapon under the edge of their opponent's shield, and with a quick pull, open the flank. It was an infamous technique, and the crowd in Rome knew exactly when it was about to happen. The power of the curve. The curvature of the Securus allowed for attacks impossible to replicate with straight blades. Upward strokes under the rib cage. The angle caused the blade to go between the ribs and hit the lung or liver. Horizontal cuts that embraced the muscle. A sideways tug could tear entire fibers from the abdomen or arm. Attacks from behind the enemy shield. The curve bypassed the defense, something that gladiators with large shields deeply feared. Why did gladiators fear her? Because the axe was unpredictable. The arena was noisy, dusty, and full of distractions, and a curved blade could penetrate where the eye couldn't see. Reports describe Myrmiones using the Securus for cutting tendons in the arm that was holding the shield, to open the thigh muscle to disable movement, pierce below the collarbone, pull the enemy closer before the final blow. In real combat, that was enough. A single, well-fitting cutto turn, the fight into a race against time. And the Myrmillo knew how to take advantage of that. Among all the weapons of gladiators, few carried so much. Tactics, speed, and public humiliation as for the whole set of netkeeper. One lightweight trident, extremely sharp, and a heavy network capable of deciding the fight even before the first blow. Unlike armored gladiators, the retiarius fought almost without protection. And the reason for that was simple. He didn't win by force, won by mobility, for the reach in by the ability to destroy the enemy's posture before the fight even begins. The network, the most underrated weapon in the arena. The retiarius's net was not a piece of rope thrown haphazardly. She had weights on the edges, which increased the speed of the fall. Thick mesh, difficult to cut in the heat of battle. Precise opening, designed to secure arms, shoulders, or legs. Reinforced cables, allowing you to pull and unbalance your opponent. When thrown correctly, it decided the fight, less than a second. How the internet killed the fight. It held the arm of the weapon, disabling blows. It got tangled in my legs, causing the enemy to fall. It covered his face, obstructing vision and creating panic. He was pulling his opponent, exposing his back and flank for the final blow. Experienced gladiators knew. If the net hit even once, the fight was practically over. The trident, deadly reach. With his other hand, the retiarius held errand trident with tips designed for 2. Pierce deep muscles, tear ribs, to reach organs from a distance, to pierce the enemy without needing to get close. The trident had a much greater reach than the gladius, which constantly put the opponent at a disadvantage. Its open geometry also meant that blocking was almost useless. Even large shields had difficulty against it. The weapon bypassed the defense and hit arms, shoulders, and legs. Why was he so feared? Because the retiarius transformed combat into a hunt. He didn't fight on equal terms. He exhausted his opponent, forced risky moves, and when he saw an opening, the net fell, the enemy stumbled, and the trident penetrated where the armor did not protect. Rome was vibrating. The opponent was crumbling. And the retiarius, almost naked, proved that intelligence and strategy were as deadly as iron and bronze. Among the most feared weapons in the arena, few had the reputation of Thracian sica, a short, curved, and aggressively angled sword that did one very simple thing. It rendered the enemy's shield useless. The Thracian, one of the most agile and unpredictable types of gladiator, used this blade to attack from impossible angles. Sica didn't need to face the defense. She went around the defense. And that is why the Roman audience loved it, and its opponents hated it. 1. The curvature was everything. The sica had an aggressive curve that allowed for strikes coming from from top to bottom, following the outline of the shield, from the bottom up, entering from under the defensive line, laterally looking for ribs and kidneys, diagonally, hitting areas covered by the armor. This curvature functioned like a cutting hook, which did not depend on force. It depended on geometry. An experienced gladiator could strike the opponent's shoulders, neck, and even the inside of their arm without ever exposing their own body. 2. Specialist in killing behind the guard. While straight weapons struck the surface of the shield, the sica entered behind. The Thracians constantly sought exposed armpit, the back of the shoulder, the side of the neck, the enemy's back as he turned, the space between the ribs. All of these locations were targets for quick death and were hardly protected. 3. The short blade provided deadly speed. Measuring between 30 and 45 cm, the sica was not designed for long duels. It was made for repeated blows at high speed, attacks that confused the opponent, short and deep cuts, sudden changes of direction. The Thracians seemed to attack from two places at the same time. The audience could only see the gleaming arc of the blade, and then the blood. 4. Why did gladiators hate fighting against the sica? Because it negated the main line of defense for half the arena, the large shield of the murmillo. Shields that protected against the gladius did not protect against the curve of the sica. Furthermore, the Thracian was light, mobile, aggressive, and unpredictable. If the opponent made a single mistake, the sica would find meat. It was a weapon made for chaos, and Rome loved chaos. Among all the weapons in the arena, none seems as absurd and as deadly as the scissor, a weapon that defies modern common sense. A solid metal tube, reinforced, attached to the gladiator's forearm, ending in a curved and sharp blade which functioned as an axe, hammer, and dagger all at once. At first glance, it looks like something invented by video games. But the scissor did exist, and the gladiators who faced this weapon knew they were about to deal with one of the most brutal styles in the arena. 1. An arm wrestling match that turned the fighter into a human battering ram. The metal shaft of the scissor shears was thick, heavy, and absolutely solid. He served as a sort of narrow shield, impact weapon, full forearm protection, platform for short, devastating strikes. The advantage was obvious. The arm that would normally be vulnerable now became the most resilient weapon in the sea. Fight. A scissor blow to the chin, nose, or temple could knock a gladiator down instantly. 2. The front blade was designed to crush and cut at the same time. At the tip of the tube, there was a curved, reinforced blade. It was designed for cut muscles, to cause deep wounds in the torso, tearing meat when pulling, broken ribs from the impact, to hit the face in a devastating way. Imagine the force of a punch. Now add an iron blade in front of that punch. That was the principle of scissor. Shearing. 3. The weapon nullified traditional defense techniques. Gladiators with large shields had difficulty blocking because the scissors went in from below. He struck with enough force to dislodge the shield, broke the enemy's posture, hit the target with a tight and unpredictable angle. Gladiators with blades had another problem. The smooth metal surface deflected many blows. It was like trying to cut down a lamppost. 4. The scissors style was aggressive, direct, and intimidating. Gladiators using scissor blades advanced without hesitation, pressing their opponent with impact blows to the head, short thrusts aimed at the neck, violent shoves, unpredictable flank attacks. In the arena, retreating meant losing. The scissor was made to advance all the way to the end. 5. Rome adored the brutal spectacle of this weapon. Combat involving the scissor shears was fast, noisy, and unpredictable. The crowd saw shield fragments, blood gushing from short cuts, gladiators being pushed around like rag dolls. Audible impacts even in the last rows. It was the kind of violence that the Colosseum was created to amplify. The scissor was not just a weapon, it was a show. And behind that show was pure, functional brutality. Among the lesser-known but most feared weapons of the arena was the deadly combination of reinforced manica, an entire arm covered in metal plates and stiff leather, and the harpax, a short, brutal hook embedded in or wielded alongside the weapon's arm. Unlike traditional weapons, this pair wasn't just for attacking. It served Tomaster to secure, to pull and check the enemy. It was close quarters combat, where every inch of movement meant life or death. 1. A sleeve half armor, half weapon. The manica covered it, shoulder, biceps, forearm, part of the back of the hand, made of metal plates, boiled leather, articulated straps, padded lining. She had two clear purposes: full protection of the dominant arm. The weapon remained secure, even under violent blows. An opponent attempting to cut off that arm would simply waste energy, allow impact attacks. Yes, the gladiator, he was hitting it with his arm as if it were an armored baton. It was so common that some manichae were slightly reinforced on the surface to maximize damage. 2. The harpax hook that decided the fight in hand-to-hand combat. The harpax was a short, often double hook designed for pull the opponent's shield down, to restrain the enemy's leg or wrist, leaving yourself open to the fatal blow, to unbalance the opponent, lock the neck or shoulder. Unlike cutting blades, the harpax worked by lever, not by the wire. This made the weapon dangerous even against lightly armored combatants. Experienced gladiators used the harpax to restrain their enemy for a fraction of a second, a fraction long enough for the final blow. 3. The fighting style was suffocating and violent. The combination of manica and harpax transformed the gladiator into a close-range predator. Typical strategy. Move forward, ignoring minor cuts thanks to the protection of your arm. To lock the enemy's shield or weapon with the grappling hook. To pull sharply, completely throwing the opponent off balance. Finish with a blow from a sword, dagger, or scissor. Within seconds, the fight would go from a clean exchange of blows to a savage contest of grappling, pulling, and pain. 4. Why did the audience love it? Because that fighting style was unpredictable, explosive, extremely physical, full of falls, spins, and collisions, visually chaotic. The arena vibrated with the feeling that any second could decide everything. The combination of manica and harpax was not just a weapon, it was total physical control, a style that made the opponent feel like they were being hunted. If there was one weapon that all gladiators, from the heaviest to the lightest, truly feared, that weapon was the dagger. Small, silent, discreet, and deadly. In the chaos of the arena, when shields shattered, blades slipped, nets tore, and strategies crumbled, the Pugio always emerged to decide the fight. The public often didn't even see the coup. I could only see the result: one gladiator falling to his knees, clutching his abdomen, while the other retreated with his dagger still stained with blood. The Pugio was a weapon from opportunity and from execution. 1. Made to kill at close range, very close range. With its short, triangular shape, the Pugio was perfect for strikes from below the guard, stabs, between ribs, quick punctures in the abdomen, shortcuts at the neck, attacks that ignored large shields. At close range, it was more dangerous than a sword, and in the arena, the short distance was unavoidable. 2. The triangular shape tore more than it pierced. The threat of the Pugio was strange to modern eyes. It didn't function like a regular dagger. The triangular blade, it opened large wounds. It hindered coagulation. It tore fabrics when entering and leaving, increased the chance of sudden hemorrhage. It was not a weapon of intimidation. It was a weapon that delivered results. 3. The weapon of lost moments. Pugio usually appeared when the gladiator fell. The enemy was advancing too far. The shield was stuck in an awkward position. The sword got stuck. Two fighters collided and became entangled. All it took was the slightest opening for the final blow to be delivered. Many battles depicted in graffiti and inscriptions illustrate exactly that. Seemingly balanced duels that end in a single short thrust to the flank. 4. It was the most democratic weapon in the arena. Everyone could use Pugio: gossip, tratio, follower, hoplomachus, netkeeper. Each type of gladiator had a different style, but they all had Pugio as a plan B. And in the Colosseum, plan B was usually what kept you alive. 5. A punch could have ended in seconds. Rome knew this. The editors knew this. The audience knew this. When a gladiator drew his sword, the Colosseum held its breath. Because at that moment, the fight ceased to be a spectacle and became pure survival. Among all the gladiators, the hoplomachus, he was most inspired by the classical warriors of ancient Greece, and their combination of weapons, a heavy round shield, hoplon, and a short and reinforced spear, making him one of the most technically skilled, aggressive, and unpredictable fighters in the Colosseum. The Roman arena was not a battlefield, but the Hoplomachus' arsenal carried with it thousands of years of Hellenic evolution, adapted for killing in front of a crowd. 1. The short spear, lethal precision in tight spaces. Unlike the long spears used by phalanxes, the Hoplomachus' spear was short enough to maneuver, but long enough to pierce through before the enemy reaches their guard. With her, he could, storing at a great distance, targeting legs, thighs, and abdomen, pierce between the ribs, keep the enemy away, to strike with repetitive speed, controlling the pace and distance of combat. The thrusting stroke was the registered trademark of Hoplomachus, dry, quick, unexpected, and in the arena, reach is everything. 2. The hoplon, the shield that not only defended, but dominated. The round shield looked small compared to that of the myrmillo, but it was a weapon in itself. Metal edges capable of cutting, enough weight to crush the opponent's nose, ideal curve for deflecting blades, perfect shape for pushing and unbalancing. Hoplon was not just for protection. It was a tool of physical domain, and when the opponent lost his balance, the spear would enter with surgical precision. 3. The Hellenic style, mobility and constant attack. While other gladiators relied on heavy blows, the Hoplomachus fought like a tactical predator. Short and quick steps, sudden changes of direction, diagonal attacks with the spear, attacks that unbalanced the opponent, active use of the shield to push and create openings. His movements were so fluid that many accounts say it was difficult to see the fatal blow, only its effect. 4. Favorite target, legs and abdomen. The short spear allowed for exploration, low points, especially against gladiators with large shields or heavy armor. The most common targets were inner thigh, lethal target, lower abdomen, ribs exposed when turning, unprotected shoulder. A single, well-placed blow in those areas could decide everything. 5. The audience loved his tactical fighting. Hoplomachus was fast, technician, intelligent, aggressive in just the right way. Visually stunning his style, inspired by Greece but adapted to Roman spectacle, combined constant movement with precise attacks. It was a deadly dance, and extremely efficient. If the retiarius represented mobility, reach, and unpredictability, the follower, it represented the opposite: constant pressure, relentless advance, and outright brutality. To face a fighter armed with a trident and net, the secutor needed more than just strength. He needed a trident of his own, shorter, heavier, and more destructive. This was not the elegant trident of the retiarius. It was impact instrument, created to crush, pierce, and destroy the enemy's posture. 1. Heavy construction to disrupt the opponent's rhythm. The secutor's trident had thicker stems, wider tips, weight concentrated at the top, balance designed for short, powerful strikes. While the retiarius needed speed and range, the secutor sought to stop the enemy, literally to disrupt their movement with pure impact. The goal wasn't just to drill, but break the fight, break the defense, break the body. 2. Destroying the advantage of the retiarius. The secutor needed to neutralize two dangers: a read the distance of the light trident of the retiarius. His heavy trident was created precisely for that purpose. How he annulled the retiarius. Blows from above crushed the net before it opened. Lateral impacts would knock down the retiarius's lightweight trident. Attacks to the leg forced the enemy to retreat. Quick thrusts expelled the retiarius from the safe zone. O wise follower, the closer he got, the more the fight ended. The retiarius did not survive in hand-to-hand combat. 3. Close quarters combat meant death for the retiarius. The secutor continued with bronze armor on the head, ideal against the net, large rectangular shield, heavy steps that quickly closed the distance, low stance, ready to absorb blows. And when the secutor reached the retiarius, the heavy trident became a devastating short-range weapon. Pierces the abdomen, tears the shoulder, breaks the collarbone, hits the face with brutal impact. The arena knew, if the secutor succeeded a single clean breakthrough, the fight would turn into an execution. 4. Rome loved the contrast between these two styles. Nothing was more exciting for the audience than speed versus force, reach against pressure, lightness against brutality, hunting against counter-hunting. and the heavy trident of the secutor was the visual key to this contrast. When he landed a blow, the entire arena reacted, because the fight changed instantly. 5. The heavy trident served as both weapon, shield, and hammer. He could, to pierce like a spear, crush like an apple, deflect blows like an iron bar, to push like a battering ram. Few gladiatorial weapons were as versatile or as destructive as this one. Among all the weapons used in the arena, few were as underrated and as strategic as the fascina, the short throwing spear, carried by gladiators such as the follower, the gossip, the hoplomachus, and even some hybrid styles. It seemed too simple for the Colosseum, but when used at the right moment, it could to completely change the fate of the fight in less than a second. The fascination didn't exist to kill instantly. She existed for create chaos, and from the chaos came death. 1. A projectile designed to break the enemy's posture. The fascinator was short, heavy at the tip, and designed for deflect the opponent's shield, to stick into the ground and hinder movement, reach legs and knees, to force the enemy to regain balance, to stop critical attacks. Even a throw that didn't pierce flesh created a risk, instability, and instability was all a seasoned gladiator needed. An unbalanced fighter is a dead fighter. 2. The tactical throw. The exact moment was the real weapon. The fascinator wasn't thrown at just any time. The gladiator waited. The enemy accelerate, change the footrest, raising the shield too high, close the side guard, to initiate a predictable coup. When the opponent's body was compromised, the throw would happen. Quick, silent, unexpected. And the fight changed immediately. 3. The fascination was a forced opening. As soon as the throwing spear forced an exaggerated reaction, lowering the shield, twisting the torso, taking 2 steps back, the gladiator would attack with sword, sica, scissor, dagger, trident. The final blow came while the opponent was still processing the throw. It was a weapon created for force error, and no gladiator survived their own mistake. 4. Short punctures were more dangerous than the full throw. Although it was used from a distance, the fascinator also functioned as a hand weapon. Pierces abdomen, rips thigh, opens flank, crosses the collarbone, punctures between ribs. Gladiators, expecting the weapon to be thrown, often forgot that it could be used as a small spear, and that cost lives. 5. The Roman audience loved suspense. The audience knew that when the fascinator was lifted, something was going to happen. Silence filled the Colosseum for a moment. The throw closed the distance, and the struggle shifted, one way or the other. The fascinator was more than just a weapon. It was the spark that transformed combat into a deadly spectacle. If there was one weapon that made the Colosseum tremble with the sound of its impact, it was the sand hammer, the short, brutal hammer used by some heavy gladiators. It doesn't appear very often in modern reconstructions, but graffiti, mosaics, and descriptions indicate that this weapon existed as a regional and occasional variant, used in fights intended to impress the public with brute force. Malleus didn't cut, it didn't pierce. That wasn't necessary. He broke. 1. An instrument of absolute impact. The malleus was basically a reinforced iron block mounted on a short, thick rod, heavy enough to crush bones with a single blow. There was no such thing as clean combat with that weapon. There was direct violence, dry, undeniable. The function of the malleus was very simple. If you guessed correctly, something broke. Ribs, clavicle, jaw, arm, shield, or courage. 2. The fighting style was based on constant pressure and threats. The gladiator, armed with the malleus, advanced with short steps, pushing the enemy back. He wasn't looking for technical precision. He was looking for psychological breakdown. When the hammer was raised, the opponent already knew. Blocking it would cause numbness in the arm. Trimming could fracture fingers. Retreating would create a territorial disadvantage. Failing on defense would cost them the fight. It was a weapon forged from fear. 3. The counter-shield function, purposeful destruction. The malleus was one of the few weapons capable of split the wood of the shield, deform light metal, move the shield off the arm to break down the entire defensive structure. The audience loved this moment. When a blow from malleus shattered the shield, the battle descended into chaos, exactly what Rome wanted to see. 4. Deadly at close range. Despite its weight, the malleus was surprisingly agile at short range. Upward blows to the jaw, side impacts to the temple, blows to the shoulder to knock away an enemy's weapon, oblique blows that bent the shield. And when the gladiator knocked down his rival, even partially, the fight was practically decided. 5. The weapon that symbolized pure brutality. Unlike tridents, sica, nets, or short spears, the malleus did not depend on refined technique. It depended on weight, opportunity, aggressiveness, explosive force. And this created an extremely visual spectacle. The impact echoed in the Colosseum. Dust rose, the audience screamed, and the fight changed in a single second. It was the weapon of shock, and Rome thrived on shock. Among all the weapons in the arena, one was present in almost every fight, regardless of the gladiator's style. Avery, short sword lightweight with reinforced tips and an aggressive blade, the fighter's sword, the execution sword. It was not used for long duels. She existed for finish. When nets failed, hammers missed, spears broke, or shields clashed, combat inevitably descended into extreme hand-to-hand combat. And at that moment, when the sound of the audience faded and everything was reduced to centimeters, the Gladius Pugnatoris decided the end. 1. The minimum blade size for maximum lethality. Measuring approximately 30 to 40 centimeter, the Gladius Pugnatoris was perfect for pierce between the ribs, to cut the throat with a single movement, open the abdomen, attacking low points that are impossible for larger blades, killing in tight spaces where the arm can barely move. In falls, grabs, and collisions, it behaved like a natural extension of the hand, and that made it relentless. 2. The underground strike, the deadly signature of the arena. Gladiators used this weapon to deliver a nearly invisible blow. Stick to the enemies. Body, stick the blade under the ribs, push up, twist slightly. This movement affected the diaphragm, lungs, liver, and often the abdominal artery. The audience could hardly understand what had happened. The more she knew, it was fatal. 3. The weapon of advantage when everything turns to chaos. O sword of the fighter, arise when gladiators tangled on the ground. The shield was locked. The fight was getting too close. The enemy was trying to immobilize the arm. Two weapons were stuck together. When all seemed lost, this sword unlocked death. 4. Easy to hide, easy to draw, impossible to ignore. Many gladiators carried it as a secondary weapon, strapped to their chests, to the belt, to the shield, to the forearm, based on the main gladius. And this created constant tension. No one knew when it would be used. They only knew that when it appeared, it was the end. 5. The weapon that most defined the Roman spectacle. It wasn't the most eye-catching one. It wasn't the heaviest one. It wasn't the most exotic one. But it was the most decisive. The Colosseum was built on suspense and shock, and nothing was more shocking than the final blow. Quick, muffled, decisive. If you enjoyed learning about the most brutal weapons of the arena, those that Rome used to turn fighting into a spectacle, sign up for Blades and Shadows. Leave a like and comment which gladiatorial weapon you'd like to see explained in detail in the next episode. Your support helps the channel continue to bring you real, bloody, and impressive stories from the ancient world.